Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I hope everyone is doing, I think it's this evening, back from the standpoint of Eastern Standard Time. I was asked to do a video by a subscriber of the show, discussing Canova. And I jumped at the opportunity to do it. Tim Canova is a friend of the show. And fact is, I agree with the original premise. Let me explain what I mean. Back during the 2016 primaries, 200,000 people were thrown off the rolls in New York. 120,000, 117,000 just on Bernie Sanders' hometown of Brooklyn. Now, whether you want to say that there was nefarious motives behind this, which I do believe, or whether you want to say that this is just buffoonery and people who are just clumsy and just made a, coincidental mistake, can we agree with the basic premise that if you are in a democratic process or democratic government, be it representative or democratic, voting is paramount. Voting is paramount. If you can't, at a very basic, poll your public to figure out what your public wants, then I will put to you that you do not have a democracy, you do not have a representative government, you have something else. After those 200,000 people were thrown off the rolls in Brooklyn, it was admitted that it was a breach of federal and state law. In admitting that it was a breach of federal and state law, they were slapped on the wrist, not even that hard as I slapped them on the wrist, saying that they were going to make certain changes to make sure that people would be able to vote. In the last election, Mayor de Blasio's son was not able to vote. Nomi Kantz, who was on the Unity Reform Commission, was not able to vote. Members of the Huffington Post staff were not able to vote. It wasn't that these people weren't on the rolls. It wasn't that these people hadn't voted in prior elections. It wasn't that these people fell within the cracks of New York City's voting weird rules that said you have to be out like 8 months out before you can even make a vote. Or meaning New York requires you to be like 8 months out. It's some ridiculous amount of time. That number may not be exactly precise, but it's a very long time where you have to have been registered in the Democratic Party if you wanted to make a vote. In many cases, you might not even know who was running that would pique your interest. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are part of the Democratic Party establishment, voted in all of these previous elections, and for whatever reason, when they went to the voting rolls, expunged. There's a certain dickishness with doing that to Nomi Kantz, seeing as she was part of the Unity Reform Commission. Voting is fundamental. Voting is basic. I put to you again, if you can't get that basic part right, you don't have a democracy, you have something else. Back during the 2016 election, it wasn't just the Democratic Party screwed over Bernie Sanders. You had other primaries that were taking place during that time. One of those primaries was Tim Canova's race against the corrupt Debra Wasserman Shultz. Swamp creature Debra Wasserman Shultz ran against Tim Canova in the primary, and Tim Canova supposedly lost. With all of the hijinks that was going on with the elections, Tim Canova, within his right, wanted to challenge the election, or at the very least wanted to inspect the ballots. Tim Canova was informed at some point that those ballots had been destroyed. Now again, just like what took place in New York, this was a breach of federal law. If I'm not mistaken, this was a breach of state law. What are the consequences? Just like in New York City, what are the consequences here? And are those consequences sufficient enough to prevent something like this from taking place again? What I will put to you is just like in New York, where people complained and there was a slap on the wrist, and then immediately in the very next election of consequence, what do you know? The exact same thing happens because there was no real consequence for what took place prior. I'm putting to you that what took place in Florida under the ballot in Broward County was a crime. It was a complete crime. They destroyed the ballots. Now, when Tim Canova pushed to inspect the ballots and he was told, well, we only have a photocopy. Well, a photocopy is not enough. I need to see the ballots. I have not just a right, I have a responsibility to challenge and make sure that the people who are putting money and backing me, who are supporting me, who are out there pushing for me, who are phone banking for me, that I am pushing as hard as I can possibly push to ensure that either I get in office or I at the very least make the best sporting attempt that I can make to get in that election. And what Tim Canova found was that not only was it illegal, that other people, for whatever reason, in the political process, in the Democratic Party, didn't care. It didn't care. Election integrity should be fundamental to your political process. And I put to you that that is not the situation to which we find ourselves. Of the people who are running in that race against Debra Wasserman Shultz, there's one person who's in this idea of election integrity. You may say he was motivated heavily based on what took place in the primaries, in the Democratic primaries, and in the primaries with him. So what? Reality, experience itself is a motivator to behavior. And does that make me trust him a little bit more from the standpoint of election integrity? Yes. Yes. I want that corrupt Debra Wasserman Shultz to lose. Not just want her to lose. The person who I want put into that slot, at the very least, I want them to have some level of credibility that, let's be honest, the corrupt Debra Wasserman Shultz doesn't. She was so corrupt, she was fired from the DNC, after which she was hired from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Is that who you really want back in Florida? Vote Canova. Sanders' platform, vote Canova. A difference being election integrity. Is this the woman that you want winning in Florida once again after cheating the guy, or potentially cheating the guy? At the very least, there was some shenanigans that went on around the voting. I'm saying vote Canova. I'm saying vote Canova. Support Canova. I'm putting this information at the bottom so you can see for yourself. There is one thing I want you guys to see, though. Let's see. So, right here. Just, I don't think Tim Canova would mind me showing this, because this is a positive video about Canova. But just as a primer on what took place prior.
A number of election integrity folks started contacting me. They had started to analyze the data. They started to have some real questions.
We thought, let's put in a public records request under Florida's law. Florida has a very good public records law.
And right off the bat, we were told by the Broward County Supervisor of Elections they didn't do any digital scanned images of the ballots. Like 6 months went by, and the Broward County Supervisor of Elections just was stonewalling us. So I brought a lawsuit last June. And while the lawsuit was pending, we learned that the Broward Supervisor of Elections destroyed all of our paper ballots and destroyed them in September of 2017 while the litigation was pending.
Now, isn't there a statute that they're supposed to hang on to those ballots
Yes.
for a certain amount of time? How long are they supposed to hang on?
Federal statute says 22 months.
For the purposes of destruction of records, is there a difference between a state and federal election?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what's the difference?
Well, for federal elections, not races, federal elections, the destruction schedule is 22 months. For local elections, the destruction date is 12 months. And, you know, as it relates to this situation, I think the problem is that we had, they were destroyed by mistake.
Isn't it odd how we just keep having mistakes? Isn't that odd? 200,000 people throwing off the rolls in Brooklyn. Oh man, it's just a mistake. That's all it was. Just so happens to be a burning a hometown. Oh, just a mistake. It's just another mistake. All these mistakes just keeps happening. Tim Canova, same thing. We just accidentally destroyed the ballots. Our bad. We wanted nothing to see. That wasn't a big deal. Our bad. It was, oops, it's just a mistake. Hey, why are we shutting down all of these polling locations in places where we know people are probably going to start showing up in droves, making it more difficult for those people to vote and extending the lines in a similar way that Republicans do when they're trying to bleed off people in their process? Just a mistake. Nothing to see here, folks. Hey, why are those lines so long in Arizona? Oh, it was just a mistake. Why are people being accused of throwing chairs in Utah? All of these things are always a mistake. All of these mistakes always lend towards the powerful and established order of things. Aren't you sick of that? Aren't you sick of that? That woman looking like a mob boss talking about it was just a mistake that we destroyed the ballots. Does that pass your sniff test? Vote Canova. Vote. Support Tim Canova. I'm putting his stuff at the bottom. So Shultz equals destroyer. Shultz equals destroyer. I don't want this one to go too long because I want this one to be digestible. And I want my point to be very clear and not necessarily get mangled. I brought Tim Canova on the show because I like Tim Canova. And I have to judge whether or not I think the credibility of a person is sincere. And do I believe he's motivated for issues of election integrity? Yes. Do I believe that his platform is Bernie-esque and that he means it? Yes. Does that push me to say or to tell people to vote Tim Canova? Yes. Vote Canova. Thanks all.